Hello and welcome to one of our shorts on the sustainability is the key, how to unlock your organisation's potential to tender success. This short version is going to be on modern slavery. And just to briefly introduce myself, I'm Sarah Joy Newton. My company is Amethyst Connect. I am by background an adult and paediatric qualified nurse. I've also been a medical sales representative and a product launch specialist. I'm an internal ISO auditor for 9001 and 14001, and I have an expertise in public procurement requirements, procedures and compliance. I'm a social value associate and a social return on investment practitioner, and I also am a carbon footprint calculator, having done the GHG protocol training. So what are we going to cover in this particular episode? Today, we're going to look at organisations having the responsibility to support the elimination of global modern slavery, and also there are mandatory tender requirements that you will need to deliver. The key learning points we're going to look at are the legislation, the MSAT, modern slavery statement requirements, and also a training solution. The Modern Slavery Act 2015 put in place measures to combat slavery and human trafficking. It gave more powers enforcement and more measures to protect victims. There was a consolidation of previous criminal offences and also an introduction of some new criminal offences surrounding modern slavery. Also, the punishments for offenders of modern slavery became suitably severe. There was an appointment of an independent anti-slavery commission, and also there was a requirement to eliminate modern slavery in global supply chains, which then included a mandatory yearly statement from larger organisations. We saw a procurement policy note originally in February 2023, and this was updated in February 2025 with Procurement Policy Note 009, tackling modern slavery in government supply chains. What this asked for was more transparency, supply chain mapping, internal risk assessment, risk mitigation, policies and processes, and organisational awareness. What we're now seeing for all contracting authorities is modern slavery now has to be included as part of their tender process. NHS supply chain in particular are putting their frameworks through a risk process. If the risk of the framework is deemed to be low risk, you're required to have an MSAT with a score of 41% or more. Medium risk, you would need the MSAT plus there would be a further review. And if the framework is deemed to be high risk, and we're talking frameworks that cover products such as surgical gloves, textiles, and surgical instruments, you would need the MSAT plus a further review plus third-party independent audits of your supply chain. So I've mentioned the word MSAT a couple of times. This is a public procurement assessment that can be found on the gov.uk website. It's the modern slavery assessment tool known to most of us as the MSAT. The scoring within the MSAT is if you score 0 to 40%, you are deemed to be a high risk supplier. If you score 41 to 70%, you're deemed to be a medium risk supplier. And if you score 71 to 100%, you're deemed to be a low risk supplier. The requirement, as I've already said, is to have a score of 41% or more with NHS supply chain. So what does that mean for you as a supplier? So to get a good MSAT score, you need to have certain things in place. The first thing is a modern slavery statement. Now, while many of you may not come under the requirements of a modern slavery according to the Modern Slavery Act 2015, without a modern slavery statement in place in your organisation, your MSAT score is likely to be poor or weak. So we would recommend that a modern slavery statement that is published on your website is a first step to getting things in place in your organisation. So a modern slavery statement, I'll cover in a moment what's required for that. Your supply chain. They're looking for transparency in your supply chain. So the first thing to do is to map your supply chain. Who are your suppliers? Look at tier 1 and beyond. Do risk assessment on your suppliers, and that can be a desktop risk assessment. And also following that, if you have medium or high risk suppliers within your supply chain following your risk assessment, then you would look at doing further auditing on those suppliers. You need to have policies in place, which would include policies such as ethical trading, human rights and labour standards, supplier code of conduct. There are many other types of policies that also would be relevant to this. It's also a requirement to have training for your employees within the organisation on modern slavery. So if you are in scope of the Modern Slavery Act 2015, that requires all commercial organisations that operate in the UK and have an annual turnover above 36 million must produce a modern slavery statement. Just for clarity, that means the turnover of the whole organisation, not just the turnover within the UK. So your statement must include organisation information, detailed steps taken and your KPIs. It must be approved and signed by a director. If your organisation has a website, statements must be published on that website and a link to the statement must be placed in a prominent place on that website's homepage. And if you do not have a website, you must provide a copy of the statement to anyone who provides a written request for one within 30 days. So as I said a moment ago, modern slavery statement for all suppliers. Tenders are usually asking for a modern slavery statement regardless of your scope within the Modern Slavery Act. And also for clarity, every single supplier is in scope of the modern slavery statement. We all have a responsibility to be eliminating modern slavery from our supply chains. It might be that you just aren't in scope of creating the modern slavery statement as per that guidance. But you need to have a modern slavery statement anyway if you're going to be tendering for your government contracts, including the NHS, and if you want to be able to score well in the MSAT. So you need to include your organisation structure, the business and the supply chain, your policies in relation to slavery and human trafficking, any due diligence processes that you have in place, and the parts of your business and supply chain where you can identify that there may be risk and the steps that you've taken to assess and manage that risk. There is not a requirement to give a 100% guarantee that there is no modern slavery anywhere within your supply chain. The requirement is to show that you are taking steps to review if there is risk and how to identify that risk and how to mitigate it. And also the steps that you take should cases of modern slavery be suspected or found. So continuing on the modern slavery statement requirements for all suppliers, what is your effectiveness in ensuring it's not taking place? And also, have you got KPIs that are appropriate for that? It asks about your training and capacity building about slavery and human trafficking that's available to your staff. And in some tenders, we're seeing that if you haven't got a modern slavery statement or document in place, it does ask you to explain why you don't. And also they would like to see that in place before the contract award. Your modern slavery statement can also be uploaded. It needs to be uploaded to your company website in the first instance, but there are also 2 repositories for modern slavery statements in the UK. The first one is the TISC report, and you particularly need to be adding to that if you are working with Welsh Health Supplies, as that's their reference point for where they look for modern slavery statements. And then you've got on the Gov UK, part of their website, you've got the Modern Slavery Registry, and it needs to be uploaded there. You need to also be carrying out modern slavery training for your staff, and this should include the modern slavery statement requirements, the 11 ILO forced labour indicators, indicators of modern slavery and how to recognise the signs, how to report, how to consider risks in procurement, how to undertake due diligence. Your MSAT needs to be completed annually. Your modern slavery statement needs to be updated and published annually. And your modern slavery training should be taken on induction and ideally every year, or as an absolute minimum every 2 years. If you don't know where to find modern slavery training, we can direct you to Tick the Box. Tick the Box Compliance Solutions is a one-stop shop for labour standards and modern slavery training, and it's all included in that one platform for you. So, in conclusion, there is an organisational requirement around modern slavery for participating intenders. You need to publish a modern slavery statement annually, and you need to complete every year the MSAT and have a score of above 41%. If you have any questions on any of these topics that I've covered, please visit my website or contact me via email or on my mobile. I would be delighted to speak to you more about how you can comply with modern slavery requirements. If you also have further interest in procuring with the NHS and want to know more about carbon reduction plans, NHS net zero, social value, or how to tender with the NHS, then please contact me and I'd be happy to help, or take a look at another one of my Sustainability is the Key seminars.